welcome back to our creative video series. This morning what I'm going to show you is an Accuquilt die called a Crazy Patch. And in reality, you actually have a choice of two depending on the size of your cutter. So the Accuquilt cutter, if you have the electric one, or what they call the Go Big, you can do the larger version of this block. And this block, when you are done, I'm just trying to say, is it going to be a 10-inch block when it's finished? So that's the first option. Oh, Pam says, give you the die number. So it is die number 55861. So the other option is a 6-inch, and this is the one I'm actually going to stitch today. And this can be done in both the electric, the Go Big, but also in the Go Cutter, which is one of the cranking cutters. The only one that it won't fit in is the Baby or the Go Me, which is too narrow to do it. But what's really cool is these two dies, other than the size, are exactly the same die. There's no difference in the piecing whether you do the big or the small. So it kind of gives you some creative possibilities for that. So we are going to grab the die. And so you can see on the die, I have some markings, and on some of the new dies that are coming in, these are actually already printed on. So this one here, I have it labeled by letters. So we have A, B, C, and D is C, then D, E, F, G, H, I, J on them. I didn't do the order. I simply took the order off of the directions. So just follow the directions with it. Now you can do, Crazy Patch is great for using up scraps. So you could take and do individual fabrics, and you could cover individual blocks. So we could do a different fabric. So you could really use some of those weird and strange fabrics that we have, the scraps that are in our stash that are almost too little to use, but they're too big to throw away. When you overlap them, don't overly worry. You don't have to cut the shape and like, oh, I got to get it right on this particular one. So long as it's covering the two-tone part of the foam, it's okay if it overlaps, because remember, you can do up to 6 layers of fabric. So if you have a couple overlapping, it's only a couple layers. It's not a big deal to do. So you could do totally random Crazy Patch blocks by covering them individually. However, I wanted to show you if you wanted to make a bunch of blocks, maybe for a quilt, or it's what I did for Table Runner. I don't know if Pam can flip up. Go there. We'll flip this way. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. So all of these blocks were done out of the same fabrics. So to do this, you need to do 8 fabrics. And make sure when you're doing your 8 fabrics that you pick things that have enough contrast to them, so that you're not going to have like light pink and then a medium light pink next door and you don't really see the delineation on the block. Make sure that you have a little bit of contrast with it. Crazy Patch quilts have got a history of doing wild and crazy fabrics. Like people would use their clothes, like, you know, they take old ties and velvet curtains, and so it's quite common to do all kinds of different things. Pick your 8. So I've got my 8 here. And what you're going to do if you're going to do this method is you're going to cut your squares basically the size of the mat. So all I did is I laid the mat down and I scissor cut around it. I didn't rotary cut, I didn't square it up, I just cut them out. Now remember, we can only run 6 layers of fabric through, and we have 8 fabrics here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this into 4s. So I'm going to run 4 through, and then I'm going to run 4 through again. So we'll go ahead, we'll cover that up. It is important that you have all of the right sides facing up. You don't want to have them so that you have a right and a wrong, because that's going to throw the piecing off. So we're going to cover this up with the mat, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to send it through. And remember with this one, even though I'm doing it on the electric cutter, I'm just doing that for convenience. You can definitely run this through the go. So we're going to go ahead, pop that through. While that's running through, you might want to go find yourself a small rotary mat, or possibly like your 12.5 by 12.5 square up ruler, something like that, so that we can transfer these pieces onto a flat piece. All right, so very, very important on this one to rub the mat so that we're breaking some of that static. And I'm going to slide the mat off instead of just picking it up. If you just pick it up, what will tend to happen is it tends to have those pieces attached here. And remember, these are crazy patch pieces, so they're not like squares and triangles that are like obvious. So they have slight variations in them. So we would really like to keep them in order. So we're going to set that off to the side for a second. I'm going to take my hands and I'm just going to push gently, and we're going to pull the excess off. Occasionally you'll have a thread or two because it is cutting on all kinds of weird biases. So it's not a big deal. Just go ahead. If you need to have a pair of scissors, just nick it. But our goal here is to take our time and end up with our piles still on the board. They don't have to be perfect, but we just want them to be in order. Almost done. I've got one little stubborn one just to be a pain. All right. So we now have our blocks. We can get rid of our nasty bit. If you figure something great to do with that, let me know. And we're going to come in and we're going to take a look. So if I have the label looking at my belly, then A is going to be the first one on the lower left, and I can just work my way across. There's B, there's C, there's D, there's E, and we can just pull them off. And you can see why it's nice to have kind of a little surface so that you can maneuver this around. So you might not have your cutter right next to your sewing machine, so you can carry this around. All right, so you're going to keep this facing the same direction so you don't have to refigure it out. Tuck that over there, and let's do the same exact thing. So we'll cover up. We'll take that. You might want to flip your mat a little bit so that you're not cutting on exactly the same section. And then off we go. Okay, and then once again, very important, rub the mat, pick up the edge, and we're just going to slide it off. That leaves everybody on the table. And then we'll remove our piece. All right, so I think we should be good. You should have a nice open section. That's always a good check. If you have something filled in, go ahead and put it back down. And then we're going to take our mat and we're going to transfer these right on top. So now we have 8 layers. And now we don't have to really worry about the letters, ladies. We just match the shapes. I'm always a better visual girl. All right. Die can go off to the side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to do something that they term in quilting terms as shuffling a deck. And what it's going to do is it's going to take these 8 layers of fabric and it's going to give me different combinations for all 8 of my blocks. So I'm actually setting up to do 8 blocks right here. Once we have it shuffled, then we'll just take the top layer off and work our way through. So first thing we're going to do, the very first one, we're going to leave alone. So we're not going to do any flipping. That was A. Second one is B, and I'm going to take the top layer off of the pile and put it on the bottom. So that's B. Now we're going to come to C, and I'm going to take the top 2 layers. Then I'm going to come to D, and I'm going to take the top 3 layers. Then I'm going to come to E, and I'm going to take the top 4 layers. Then I'm going to come to F, and I'm going to take the top 5 layers. Then I'm going to go to G, and I'm going to take the top 6 layers. Then I'm going to take on H, the top 7 layers. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to I, and we're going to take and do that as a centerpiece. And then we're going to come over to J, and I'm going to take just the one off. So I should end up with a really nice mixed in piece. So can you see where I have a little bit of a problem here? I've got this one here where it's going to show up exactly the same. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one from the back and flip that over, and that should give me a nice look. So I should have, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. We have 8 fabrics. So now we've shuffled them around. So every one of these blocks are going to have a different combination. You will repeat a couple, but you shouldn't repeat them too, they shouldn't be too close to each other. So how I started was didn't flip, flipped 1, flipped 2, flipped 3, flipped 4, flipped 5, 6, 7, 8 was back to the center. I flipped over and did 1 again for that one. And then because I didn't like these 2 together, I just organized and flipped 1 more. And that's all you need to do to get them mixed up. So rather than cutting them individually and having to organize them for every single block, I just did all of my organizing all at one time. All right, so let's move the cutter and let's go to the sewing machine. So the sewing machine is set up just as a normal piecing. I've got a 1/4 inch foot. I've got a 57 foot on, so it has the guide. I'm doing a gray thread because I want it to be a blender kind of situation. I've got some lights and darks going on here. And so we're going to set up, the directions are going to give you the order that you're going to do. But when I take a look at it, there's basically 3 units that we need to prep before we start to put the block together. So cleverly enough, the first unit is A, B, C. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one off the top, one off the top, and one off the top. Okay, we'll set that off to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go right sides together. This one is A, this one is B. And so I'm going to go right side together. And here's what's awesome about Accuquilt. You've got these weird looking shapes. You know, they're all kind of trapezoidy kind of effect. But when I line this up, I don't have any long pieces that are sticking out. Do you see how they've dog-eared that end? So all I have to do is line up here, and I'm going to sew down. And when I'm sewing that 1/4 inch, I'm going to end up sewing right where that little green point is. So it's super, super easy to line up. You don't have to guesstimate. And what's going to happen is when the unit is pieced, it's going to be nice and straight. So we'll go ahead and we'll pop that in. And keep in mind that you could take and do all 8 of these blocks at one time. Like I could take the B unit to the A unit and do all of those blocks at one time. I'm just going to do one for sake of convenience so that you don't have to watch me forever. All right, so there is our A unit to our B unit. So we're going to fold that back out, and now we're going to come in and we're going to put our C unit on. So once again, we're going to line up, but this time the little flat is up at the top. And it's just a really obvious, if you were to try and organize it differently, you would see, you know, you'd be like, oh, that thing's sticking out. But these things just line up perfectly. So we're going to line up on there, 1/4 inch seam at. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to press. So when you're pressing, if you have a lot of lights and darks, then you might want to press like the seam allowances toward the darker fabrics. Accuquilt is notorious for saying press your seam allowances open. Not a big fan of doing that for all these little seams. It's a lot of work. If you had bulkier fabric, if you decided you wanted to cut this out of velvet, then maybe I might go ahead and do that. But just kind of get them out of the way. What's going to be nice is these are not going to really interlock. So we're not going to have a lot of nesting of seams. All right, so next unit that we are going to do, cleverly enough, this was A, B, and C. The next one we're going to do is D and E. So that's these 2 here. So I'm going to pull this one off the top, this one off the top, and go ahead and get that lined up. Got a little interesting thing going on here. My machine automatically does a tack at the beginning of my seam, and because we got these weird looking edges, it's making it hard for it to feed. So I just went in and turned my automatic tack off. I'm going to flip it over so I don't have that lump underneath and get a bigger lump. Oh, it likes that so much better. Sometimes those conveniences are great and sometimes they're in our way. All right, so now I'm going to press this, and I definitely have a darker one, so I'm going to press up towards that darker one. All right, so we're looking like that so far. Now we're going to take and we're going to do, we did ABC, we did D, E, now we're going to do E and F. And so when you're looking, if you lose, at this point I always lose where I am. So we're going to come in and we're going to do F and G. So there's my F and G, and so I'm going to go ahead. Never mind. And we're going to come in and we're going to pop that in like that. All right, so we're going to be sewing this seam. As soon as I flip this over, once again, you're going to find that it's going to line up with those dog-eared corners. And we'll press towards the red because that's a little bit darker. So that's going to be lined up like that. All right, last one of the sections are going to be the I and the H. So H and I. See how this is working with the alphabet, guys? All you have to be able to say your alphabet is up to J for this project. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing the big or the small one, it's the same amount. And we'll press that. All right, so we only have one piece that's left, and that is the letter J. So it doesn't have a partner to go to, so it's going to get attached, and we're going to start working our way backwards. So the J is going to get attached to the H and I. And so when we flip this over, once again, you'll see, let me hold this up to the camera if I can. Do you see how that blunt piece is at the end there? It gives us where to start. Okay, so now we're going to take the H and I unit and we're going to line it up with the E and F unit. So you can see how it naturally goes into there.
G and F.
Oh, G and F, excuse me. Pam's keeping my alphabet straight for me. Thank you. We'll give that a press. And you can see, can you see that? Do you see how this seam goes here and this seam goes here? So really it isn't a worry as to which way you press your seams because they're not really going to nest together. So you don't have to worry about that. All right, so we've got that. So now we're going to come in and we're going to do our E and D unit. And it really is helpful to have your iron set up by your machine because I don't think you can really go from step to step without pressing in between. It would get a little too lumpy to do that. All right, last seam and we are done this block. So we could come in, we're going to flip this. And once again, you'll see that you'll have your flat pieces on both ends so you know that you have it lined up properly. And dun dun ta da, we have our block. Let me get the other ones out of the way. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we can continue to piece these blocks and create blocks to put on a table runner or whatnot. But what I just wanted to kind of show for your possibilities is Crazy Patch has a history of doing, you know, they pieced the block and then they went back and they did all kinds of beautiful hand embroidery, feather stitches, blanket stitches, that kind of thing over the top of these seams. And you could totally do this with your sewing machine. So if you're going to do this, you need to approach it one of two ways. You can either take it and put a stabilizer behind it. So something like a tearaway, maybe a Pellon stitch and tear, something that has a little bit of firmness to it that will rip away so it's not going to be in your project forever, to support doing the decorative stitches. Because if we did the decorative stitches just on our fabric, the way it is right now, you would find that it's going to want to pinch the fabric and make it so that it's like tunneled. So that's one approach to it. My approach to this is, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a piece of batting that is fairly densely done. We don't want something that's a real airy one where the feed dogs are going to rip at it, but my favorite is like Warm and White or Warm and Natural. So I'm going to grab my piece. So this is just out of the scrap. This is like off of the edge of my quilt at some point. And so I'm going to cut it and give myself a little bit bigger. So this is going to give me my stabilization, but it's going to stay as part of my project. So I will do my decorative stitches. I'll trim this off. I'll do all of my blocks. And then when I do my table runner or my pillow, I think I might do a pillow out of this one, I will take another layer of batting, another layer of the Warm and Natural to go underneath of it, and then do my quilting through that. It gives you kind of a trapuntoed look because under the area of the Crazy Patch block, you're going to end up with 2 layers of batting. But it makes it so that I don't have to spend forever ripping out stabilizer, and it just gives me a little bit of added dimension. Now, when you go to do this, first thing that you need to do, get your 1/4 inch foot off of your machine. Please don't kill it, kill your needle with that. The second thing I would recommend is that you take your thread that is nice and blendy and change it to something that's going to show up. You don't want to do all this extra work and have only people recognize it when they're like this close to it. So, take and put a contrast, and there's no law that says that you have to do the same color throughout the block. I would prep multiple blocks, thread up with a color, do a particular stitch, and then go ahead and change the color and do some more stitching. If you have something like a dual feed, now's the time to go ahead and use that. But I wouldn't generally do, if you have just like a regular walking foot, I wouldn't necessarily set that up when I do my decorative stitches because it limits what you can do. So if you have a walking foot that you attach to the machine, ignore it. Just put a presser foot on that your machine recommends for doing decorative stitches. For a Bernina, that would be like foot number 20, which is an open toe embroidery foot. For like a baby lock, that would be like the letter N foot. It's got a big groove out of the back side of the foot to allow the thread to go through. Anything that you would use your applique for. If you have dual feed, go ahead and use it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bop on into my quilting stitches. And I am going to pick out a feather stitch. So we will select the feather stitch. And I'm going to choose a seam. And I'm going to choose a seam where it's like one of my shorter seams so that I can not have to worry about tacking off on this end. And on this end, the decorative stitch is going to end up getting covered up by another stitch. So I'm going to do this seam here, and there's no law that says you have to do this for every single seam. You know, you might pick and choose to find the seams that you would like. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to get started with our stitch. I'm using the number 1D foot. So I have a little line in the center of my foot, and I can use that as my guide. Pam says to me, what stitch are you using? It's number 1333 if you have a Bernina. And so it's what I refer to, I'm sure it's not referred to in the book, but it's what I refer to as chicken feet, chicken tracks. Because it's what I imagine chicken tracks look like. I don't really know what chicken tracks look like. If chickens were to move rhythmically, this is probably what they would do. All right, so we're coming to the end here. We're coming in. We're going to come in. If you're not sure if you're going to cover it or not, go ahead and take the time to tack it. A lot of machines, if you've got a lot of decorative work on your machine, like decorative stitches, a lot of machines will have a securing function. So instead of when you're hitting your reverse button, it backs up, it's going to stitch in place. So that's what I'm going to do. And so it's going to go ahead and it's going to anchor in. And so we're going to cut our thread, and boom, we've got our decorative stitch. So can we scooch in there fast? Am I anywhere close?
It's not moving.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So when you're doing your decorative work, you want to pick out stitches that are more open. But don't negate your filled in stitches entirely. If you chose a satin stitch that is not like just a zigzag satin stitch that has a little bit of design to it, it would also work. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do and I tell you, the satin stitch would work so much better with a number 20 foot because it will be grooved out. It's putting down a lot of thread, but I definitely think worth the effort because look at how gorgeous it's going to be. Looking on there.
Yep.
All right.
Pretty.
So if you have decorative stitches on your machine, this is the place to use them because we expect to see decorative stitches on a crazy patch quilt. Oftentimes I talk to my students and I'll say, oh, do you have decorative stitches on your machine? And they will say, yes, I've got decorative stitches on my machine, but there's like a proviso on the end of that, and they say, but I never use them. So this is like the perfect place, and it's great because you're doing just like these tiny little seams. And so you can try out all those fun decorative stitches that you have on your machine. Much more interesting than doing just a swatch book where you stitch all of your stitches out. You can pick and choose out of the different menus. And then you may find yourself with like a few favorite ones that you're like, oh, I'm going to use that on more projects because I really like sewing that particular one. So I hope you enjoyed your video here. This was actually a request. I had a couple of people ask me, you did an Accuquilt die at the beginning, but you haven't done one in a while. So could you do another one? So please, if you have ideas, we're open to them. Send them on in, email them, come in and tell us. Thank you.